been very much looking forward to this. So let's get started on our discussion with the curators. I found something interesting as I went through the bios that Lisa had sent to me on each of these very four fascinating curators. And that was that they each have a very unique location that they work out of as a curator. One of them has a retail gallery. One of them works in a large corporate space. Another is in two different spaces that are sort of arts centers. And finally, we have someone who works out of the Hopper House, a museum dedicated to a particular artist. And along with finding out why their passion moved into curating, I'm also going to be asking each of the four of them about both the challenges and the advantages of working in their particular spaces. So I guess I will start with Ray. Ray owns his own gallery and has an awful lot of artists there, including a few that I happen to absolutely love. Eric Waxman is there. And it's just awfully nice to have you here. So what brought your passion to becoming a curator, to becoming a gallery owner?
Well, I would like to make it a a very romantic story. However, what actually happened is that I rented a very small space on South Broadway in Nyack, and it was too small. And I approached the landlord and I said, listen, that window space that you have there, if that ever comes available, I'd be interested. He said, yeah, in 2 days. Okay, so I took it. The space has a gallery space and it also has a studio space. Initially, I wanted to use the gallery space because the lighting was so great. But I ended up using the other space as a studio space, and then I actually abandoned that and made that into a second gallery. Why did I do it? I love art. I love sharing art. I like bringing artists to the fore. And there are so many of them. So many people that want to.
In the Nyack area, we are awash in artists at times, it seems.
Yes. So I just love doing that, giving everybody their chance, whether they're famous or whether they're just beginning, or it's all delightful to me. So that's essentially how it happened.
Excellent. So you are now located, however, on Main Street, correct?
I'm on South Broadway. South Broadway.
Oh, South Broadway. Oh, okay. That's the space. Okay, yes, now I know where it is. Very nice. And how has foot traffic been? Do you get a good number of folks coming by, or are you more of a destination spot? I
would say more destination, although I do get a lot of foot traffic. My space is it's in an office building, but I have the storefront, and right across from me on the other side of the hall is an ice cream store. So I get a lot of foot traffic, and a lot of smears on my wall. One of the I don't know if we're going into advantages or disadvantages yet.
We'll do that after I've introduced each of the four. So I'll come back to you on that. But I was just curious how it was in terms of, whether or not Nyack had picked up enough to have that foot traffic again that we also used to love around town. My office is in the center of the village, and it doesn't seem like it's the same yet to me, but I'm not in on weekends as much as I used to be.
I know.
So
it really varies, and the cold weather sort of dampens that as well.
But being inside your corridor, your hallway there, that sort of mini mall setup that you've got, that should be an advantage, I would think, eventually. And the ice cream parlor can't hurt.
No, it is an advantage because the wall that opens to the hallway is glass. So you can actually see the exhibit.
Excellent. Okay, I'm gonna just say hello to Shari at this point, shift over to her. Shari, why don't you tell us what brought you to the Hopper House and what brought your passions towards being a curator.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're
Well,
welcome.
the Hopper House actually came to me. When I moved to Nyack in about 2007, I started working as a curator, a volunteer curator for River Space Arts, for those who might remember it. It was,
I used to perform there
oh, great.
rather
So
frequently. Yeah.
they had a cafe space, and I really felt like in that cafe space, besides the major theater, that it could really use some art. So I started curating works there at Riverspace, and I held a giant small works community-driven art exhibition. And Hopper House took note of me, and they asked me to join their gallery selection committee. That's how they used to do things. So on the gallery selection committee, you sort of had a lot of opportunity to bring artists forward that you thought would be great for the space. And that's how it kind of started. And I would bring an artist forward and they say, would you like to curate this? And you know, the format has changed a lot in the past, you know, over 13 years that I've been there.
So you would have been involved with the small works project that was done at the Hopper House as well.
Well, they used to have that, the Small Matters of Great Importance show.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, they used to have that was a juried, I believe. That was a juried exhibition where they would have like a guest curator. So I wasn't really involved in that, but I certainly attended that. The format at Hopper House used to be, they used to show 2 artists at one time. But they're always, you know, the goal or the mission was always to have a connection to Edward Hopper, which can be loosely interpreted.
I gather, and we're going to get into that when I come back to you about the advantages and challenges of being in a space such as yours. It's a pleasure having you with us tonight. I'm going to move on to Barbara at this point. So Barbara, what brought you into the world of being a curator, into the world of putting together shows of art for all the rest of us to enjoy?
Okay, I guess it started back in the 1970s when my husband was running the Sculpture Center in Manhattan. And I was working with a friend who was the art director at Vanity Fair. And I was involved in an exhibition with her. And then we worked well together. We had gone to school at Rhode Island School of Design together. And she asked me if I wouldn't mind working with her on an idea of integrating art into the financial world. So we made a presentation down at Wall Street at the bond market, public securities, and we made a guideline of what would be the ideal. And we said that we needed a budget and we wanted to have a catalog for each show, and we would present rotating exhibitions, which we did for a 9-year period. And that really was my introduction to curating. And I absolutely fell in love with the idea of integrating 2 worlds. So we would have questions and answers. And then I was invited many years later. So I kept that up. So I grew from that to being the curator for Sloan Kettering and integrating art into the medical environment. And I became an appraiser. I am an artist. I'm the 4th generation artist. So I know this field very well from a practical studio.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, so I know it.
Like, go ahead.
Yeah, I know it from a practical field. And then I became an appraiser, valuing artwork because it was part of the process. What is it insured for? How do you insure it? And I said, oh, this is a skill I need to have. I went back to school and became an appraiser. And at one of those appraisers conferences, I rode on a bus with Carolyn DeLisser, who was at the time the curator at Blue Hill Art and Cultural Center. And we started talking about corporate spaces and how important it is for art to be integrated where people work, instead, because people are tired. Going to a gallery show is usually the friends of the artist, which is wonderful, but kind of putting art in people's right in front of them where they are was something that was my passion. And years later, when she was retiring, she said, you have to take this job. And I told her, I can't. I can't do any more than I'm doing. She said, you have to come and see the space. And I went and I saw this space. And then she said, and you have to meet my team of people. I said, okay. And when I met them and I realized that it was just a natural fit, I started at Blue Hill and I absolutely love it. It's fantastic. We do open calls for art. And I feel so privileged to be able to look at what people are doing in their studios and then to bring it out into the world where people are working. It's been something I've been doing since the 1970s, always, as one of the things that I do.
So it is alongside your own artistic path as well.
That has been taking the smallest part of my time, unfortunately, but it's okay. I'll get to it eventually.
Very cool. Excellent. Thank you. And finally, let's move on to Dick and say hello. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. And you're in two different locations. You have both Pelham Arts Center and Garner Arts. What brought you into the world of curating?
Well, I have a bit of a diverse history outside of art. So when I first got out of school, I ended up being a marketing and PR account executive guy.
Okay.
And then within the context of trying to do really cool things for clients and creating like unique and interesting experiences, I started engaging with a bunch of artists. And then outside, when I realized how much I really enjoyed that part, besides writing press releases and, you know, pitch decks, like the thing that was really dope was like me talking to these artists, going to see their work, getting to know them over a beer. And this wasn't craft beer, good. This was like Corona, right? So it wasn't like, right. So
no IPAs here.
No IPAs here at all. So just getting to know them and seeing the effort and the energy they put into the work, and then just being a bit remiss for the fact that the art school, the art college at my school, I never used to go there. I never had any friends from there. And I was like, you know, I really do need to get a little deeper into not just the artwork, but the artist. And then I began doing small shows in local community places. And then it, you know, when you put passion behind something, if you put passion and effort behind something, you know, oftentimes those are the nutrients to help grow something. And it started growing to the point where I started curating things without me hustling it up, like, you know, knocking on doors and, you know, sort of pestering, if you will, right? Because it was very that direction. But then I started to enjoy, again, all the art visits, the studio visits, hanging out with the artists, talking to the artists. And then it became, and then I'm hooked up with Charlotte. I don't know if you guys know Charlotte Moquin, who's at Pelham. But Charlotte and I did a really amazing co-curation show over at when she was at Rush Gallery. And then that kind of solidified that not only do I enjoy the artist and enjoy the art, but I had a real passion for platforming people's creativity. So that was the actual sort of passionate impetus of me getting into curatorial work. And again, it's still a bunch of knocking on doors, and it's still a bunch of pestering people.
Was wondering how much you have to seek out and how much they seek you out.
Right.
Because you do seem to have a very large stable of artists that you've worked with,
Yes.
giving voice to a lot of people that have a more urban feel to the
Right.
art that they're doing.
Yes.
So that was something that I was sort of perceiving as I looked through some of the shows that you had done. And that's got to be a challenge in and of itself too, to give that voice to
Yes.
the urban artist.
Right. Well, I've always had, so, you know, the sort of inherent challenges of being a Black guy in America is the push, the extra push that you need, the extra things that you need to break into something, whether it be a field or, it is a career. And I wasn't just coming from the standpoint of me breaking into these fields. I was coming from the standpoint of I really want to platform the artist, and I've been so, besides just being a curator, I'm also, as a writer, I was teaching these creative writing workshops to women at Rikers Island, which is a whole challenge. It's a whole other conversation. But that really solidified to me how so many voices are muted and they don't get a chance to have this level of expression, which has this like cathartic vibe to it, and it almost made me double down on how I really do need to give platforms and avenues and let people express themselves and have people show them love by seeing their work. So that's one of the energy.
Is that
Yes.
where Cover Lover Remix came from?
And it's so I've always been a record lover, right? I've always been a vinyl guy. Maybe 12 years ago, I started DJing, using vinyl. And I really just felt, I fell back in love with album covers because, the very nature of an album cover is like this, like really small, accessible, handheld piece of wonderful art that helps tell the story. Yes, it helps tells the story of what that recording artist has put into the world via music. And the cover, be it the back cover, the front cover, the liner notes, like that holy trinity in the sense of how you can also help tell the story, help express the things that you are trying to express through the music. I really just fell like deeply in love with, I always loved it. And then I had this sort of like resurgence of the love. I was like, oh my God, I love these album covers. And that was sometimes album art is the first art you almost engage with from when you were a youth, because maybe you didn't go to a museum or a gallery, or you didn't have like artists in your family, but you would do that.
Right. For those who are not aware of what we're discussing, Dick had curated a showing of reimagined famous album covers. They moved from 1 foot square to 2 feet square. But
right.
Trust me, if you're my age or younger, you're going to recognize a whole bunch of these different album covers, and they've all got a certain extra take on them from the artists that have done it. Large array of artists from what I've seen.
Yes.
And, all of those albums, including the little kid swimming in the pool, all of those images that we remember.
Yes.
It's just, it was a striking thing because I thought, what a great way to engage both people who are not used to looking at art and those who want to begin their artistic process as an artist. And this is a way they can start. I always say that Cover Lover Remix is wildly accessible for the excellent way of putting it,
for the artist and also for the visitor to the gallery, museum, or art center. So I just was very taken with that, and I was like, now there is a great setup. Okay, so I'm going to go back through the group, and we're going to discuss these challenges and these advantages of each of the spaces that they work in. So let's go back to that retail world, and that would be Ray. Having that gallery right on the street in a wonderful little place like Nyack. What are the advantages that you see as someone who can curate there, and what are the challenges that you face? I imagine some of it is simply sales and paying rent.
Well, yes. That's the biggest challenge.
Right.
Um, I would say the big advantage that I have, I mentioned before, is that I have a storefront. Um, and so passersby, I use that window rather effectively. I'll usually put an anchor piece in the window, small things around it. My gallery is not large. I've got one big wall. It's about 15 feet, and some other small walls that I can use. But the window is very important. What I often do is I'll take two pieces that are the same size and put them back to back so that one is showing into the street and the other is showing into the exhibit. So the window affords me advertising to
Mhm.
passersby. Let's put it that way. So that's really great. The other advantage I have, I mentioned before, is that if you walk into the building, my space has a glass wall. So if I happen to be closed and you want to see the exhibit, you can still view it. So that's really great. The challenges that I incur is that it's a small gallery.
Okay.
So when I'm talking to an artist, I need to get a variety of sizes. You know, if an artist has a 12-foot painting, well, that's pretty much it.
I was going to ask about that because you've got Grace Knowlton and you've got Eric David Laxman, and
Mhm.
these are not necessarily small pieces.
No, they're not. No, but we just find a way. I was always very good at Tetris, and
Ah, now we
Right,
see the
right.
secret.
Right.
so you do find a way. Yes, Eric Laxman's work is enormous. I don't know if you know Peter Strasser.
Uh-huh.
His work is even taller,
Bigger.
bigger. I had an artist once that had Jenny Chen. I don't know if you know her, but she had a spirit house. So she
Yes, that
made
was
in
very
one
popular
spirit-
here in Nyack, the whole Spirit House thing.
Yes, yes. Well, she made very small spirit houses. She was a very, very good artist, still is, but she moved to San Francisco. But it was important to her to have a spirit house in the gallery. So she built it. It took up about half of the gallery, and people would come in and swing around and sit down and enjoy the piece that she was trying to convey. Uh,
Mm.
Magnificent, just great. Um, I had I've had some installations that you would think a small gallery. Well, how are we going to do that?
Mhm.
Pat Hickman she had discovered these pieces of wood um, and covered the gallery floor with them, and also did drawings of the wood all the way around the gallery, so there was no space anywhere.
So the
And
viewer became part of the artwork
yes, well, you really
because they were
couldn't.
surrounded, they were inside the art.
Yes,
That's kind of
yes.
an interesting perspective to take a small gallery in that direction.
It was very cool. So I said to Pat, it's hard enough to get somebody into a gallery, so we have to allow them to come in somehow. So we made a very small path, and only one person could come in at a time.
Right.
Yeah, but it was cool. It really was.
Lovely.
Nice.
Excellent. Okay.
Nice.
Gonna move over to Shari. Shari, you work at the Hopper House.
I do.
We all love the Hopper House. We all love Edward Hopper. However, is that constricting at times? You've got a historic house that you cannot expand. So again, you have a little bit of a small gallery issue in certain ways, the way Ray does. You've got one of the most famous American artists ever as your muse, and his wife as your secondary muse, because she was pretty brilliant too. And without her, he wouldn't have been him. But how does that work for you, and how does that work against you? Do you find yourself bumping into things going, oh, I would love to do this show, but it just so wouldn't work at the Hopper House? Or does that not happen?
No, I think that does, but I actually enjoy the challenge. I think at first they used to have this very hard and strict rule that you couldn't nail into the walls because it is a historic landmark house.
Mhm.
And that was really hard. We had these sort of map rails going down, and
I remember those.
it distracted from the work. And it didn't allow for you to you had to do everything sort of in a row. Um, they changed that rule, so I do feel a little bit more liberated. Um, but I would definitely say, a lot like Ray, you have really two rooms in the house. For those who don't know the Hopper House, the back room is designated to Edward Hopper's memorabilia, artifacts. So whatever you do in the gallery, in the other two rooms, really have to sort of be in conversation with Hopper, or in some way. They can't work against it. Um, I do like I like the challenge of less is more. I really do believe in having breathing room around a piece of artwork. Um, it's challenging. You can't step away so much from the work in some ways. But for me, it's about sort of picking the pieces and allowing myself to sometimes edit as I go along. Um, Recently, with the big Barclay Hendricks show, that was a little tricky because this was incredibly valuable artwork. Everything had to really, really be like specific about how much I was going to ship. The Jack Shainman Gallery was paying for shipping. And we certainly did not want to store work that we weren't going to use.
Right.
So I spent a lot of time with maquettes and sort of, kind of figuring it out. When I did get into the space, it changed. But I really do love the challenge. The other thing I have to say is that when I do group shows, I did this one group show called Domesticity, which was about the domestic life that we don't always see, what goes on behind closed doors. And for me, that was really interesting for have artists come in and kind of look at the space, find their nook and cranny that they might create a piece of work. For me to actually find the right home for that piece. And also, a lot with what Ray was saying about the floor, I did have a rug that was made, out of plastic bags. And it was like, where am I going to put this that people are going to know not to step on it in such a small space? So it was a challenge.
So you have sort of the difference between psychologically almost between the buffet and the gourmet dinner, where you choose just the one beautiful plate of food that you're going to, as opposed to taking a little of this, a little of this, a little of this, which may confuse the palate. So in the artistic palette, to have maybe a focus on one piece or just a few within a room makes a certain amount more impact. You immediately made me flash back to when I was in high school. The Tut exhibition was at the Met all the way back there in the 70s. And it was one of my first artistic, oh my God moments, when I walked into a completely blackened gallery with the golden death mask and a beam coming straight down on it. And that was all that was in the entire room. And it took my breath away. It was that first moment of, oh my God, what majestic things can we produce as humans that take us to another level?
No, exactly. I mean, I agree. I mean, I can remember going to a very small church in Italy and going in a tiny, tiny room to see a Da Vinci. And it's all you need. It's all you need to be encapsulated. I mean, that's the work that I choose for that way. I think it has to be powerful work, right? And it is a challenge. Less is more. Sometimes you want to just take it all. It's the editing process.
It's interesting that you should go there because we're talking about Edward Hopper's house. Edward Hopper, who so very frequently had themes of isolation in his work. to then switch over and think of isolated art pieces that give you more of an impact, as opposed to a very crowded room with, oh, that's nice, that's nice, that's nice, where you're sort of almost window shopping your art instead of actually absorbing it, actually experiencing it. I bet he probably would be very pleased with the more minimalist style that you tend to like, from what you're saying, really, because Hopper to me has always felt a little lonely. I love his work, but it does make me feel melancholic and lonely at times. And
Right, and the characters are always contemplating, and they're very pensive. And
we even
you want to have
recreated.
that experience.
Mhm. It's one that I think we've all had at some point or another, where we felt we've been in someone's presence and yet we can still feel completely alone, which he does when he has more than one person in the painting as well. Thank you. Any other ups and downs of being in that historic space, or having to deal with Hopper's name all the time? I guess in a way it can be an advantage too.
Well, I think from what I know, the museum as the institution, I think they come up with a lot of people coming to Edward Hopper's house expecting to see actual
Hoppers,
Edward
yeah.
Hoppers.
Sorry,
just like
that
if
would
you
be
would
down by.
It's sort of like, where are the
Right.
Hoppers, right? I see that in the guest book a lot.
Take the High Line, walk into the museum, you'll find the Hoppers there.
Exactly. I think that's why it's even more so important to kind of wow them, because you want them to have you really want them to have a great experience. You want them to go through the history of Edward Hopper, feel that this was the place that he grew up in. These are the windows he looked through to do his first, landscape sketches that look at the Hudson River. But you also want to open up their worlds. And that was kind of the precipice to get me started on bringing art to Nyack. I wanted to
Mhm.
open up the world, and of course, not go against anything of this historic house. But sometimes when I put art in there, it's like you can say it, this is where it's meant to be, and that was definitely true with
That's
Barclay
great.
Hender.
As Nyack's village historian, Hopper House is very important to me. It's one of the great things to talk about. I've always wanted to do a tour of all of the places that you can see in Hopper's paintings that are in Nyack and the Nyack area. You've got the Darup House that's in there. You've got the storefront that's got the whole Sunday morning painting. Yep. And it would be so much fun to have the opportunity to do that. But a few of them are a little too far away, like Haverstraw or the gas station down in Palisades, which is sort of, some people say it's the gas station in Truro. Some people say it's the gas station in Palisades. I think it's both, because I used to live in P-Town in the summers. And those two stations look like he combined them in his artist's eye, because there's a little bit of both in both of those. But anyway, I would love to have people actually experience some of Hopper's paintings to know that this house is still right here. That's this river that goes through. So
I will pass that
thank you.
on.
Excellent. Please do. I'm going to move over to Barbara now, and we're going to discuss the challenges and advantages of working in a corporate space where it's walk-by art, where people going to lunch every day. And I know, because I actually worked there for about 3 or 4 months once on a temp job while I was between shows. And I loved the fact that there was art on the walls, but I was one of only a few people that seemed to stop and look. But I could be completely wrong, and they may have grown more used to it at this point now as well. Talk to us about art in the corporate world.
Okay, it does pose challenges, but I always think a challenge is really an opportunity for me to be as creative as possible. So I started I think one of the things I did is I started a art collecting tour, because I find professionals who are very advanced in their own field are sometimes, not everybody, but sometimes they're lacking information about art. They don't know how to collect. They don't know about the art. And so I started the tours. I first did it, I think, on a Saturday, and So people came, but then I decided I should do it really when people are working. So I did it at lunchtime, and then I walked into the cafe area and I announced, hey, join us for the art tour. It's only going to take you 15 minutes. Walk with me. I had a magnifying glass. I said, what is this? How did the artist make this? I got them engaged in looking at the art, saying, is this a print? Is it this? Is it that? Ask me questions. And it was really exciting because, you know, I did it a few times, and then we had a wall in the cafe area for art, and then they put in a big TV. So I thought of that as an opportunity. So I took photographs of the entire exhibition, and I asked the IT people, can you, for a period of time, show the whole art collection? Because people tend to park their cars in the parking lot, come into a lobby and go to their spot. They might not walk through the whole building and see the whole show. And that building has many lobbies. It's a very big, expansive space. When people come to the opening, they don't know which door to go in. So these are different challenges I have about the physical space. The space is fantastic because I can isolate an artist's work. I can integrate work. I have a lot of freedom, unlike Shari or Ray. I don't have the confines of a small space, but my other challenge is how to engage the people in looking at the art.
Who are got their blinders on and they're walking. I'm going
you
to
know,
get
they're
my
thinking
lunch.
about their work, and I get it, but you know, sometimes this is a great relief because they can relate to the work. So we've done different shows to engage people. One was called I can't think of the name of it now. Of course I can. It was structures and erosion. Wasn't quite erosion, it will come to me, but it showed things that were decaying over time and the way artists interpreted it. And so people who were, it was post-COVID, and people were really, really into it because they had seen it, they saw it in their own lives, they could relate. And so there were a lot of discussions. So I've been challenged by trying to do, besides the artist opening, different things at the center to get people into the center specifically. And then I've also organized some tours for groups. So there were retired teachers, and I will meet them. I always make myself available. And if you give me the time, I'll give you a date.
They're a great group to tour with, because I used to tour the retired teachers all over Nyack. I did all my walking tours with the retired teachers. They're an excellent group, and they tell other people.
Yes, yes. And then there's also seniors. There's been different groups, including the children. So, you know, I really love the corporate space for that reason. I'm up for the challenge of that. But I think that one of the biggest challenges I have is when I do a call for art and the decision of which works are going to make it into the show. Typically, we have 1,200 entries, artworks to look through, and we probably hang 100. So it's really hard to choose 1 out of 12 and to make a show out of it, because everybody interprets. We have very broad themes that really, people ask me, what are you looking for? I said, I'm looking for your interpretation of the theme. I don't really know it until I see it. And then the show starts to come together. But that to me is one of the things I love about it. It's a huge challenge. And we spend a lot of time looking at all of the images. And whenever I have to write the letter that you haven't been accepted, I always feel badly. But I like to tell people, it's not that your work isn't fantastic and that we don't love it. It's how I integrate it with the one next to it, because you want the show to have some sort of continuity. And so I always focus on the whole. And that to me is one of the biggest challenges in putting a show together.
I have to ask you, because I know your space so well. You can do big art if you want to, can't you?
You can, but there's limits to what you can hang on the wall as far as the weight. They have redone two lobbies with all white marble. It's gorgeous. And we have a hanging system from the top. But the wires can only, and they're very small wires, but you can't drill into those walls, but it can only hold so much weight. But, you know, again, there are other walls that we know can really take the weight. So we can take huge pieces. We had a painting that was, I think, 16 feet. And that was just gorgeous. We kept it up for a whole year because the installation was pretty serious. I mean, really, we needed like 6 guys to lift it while we were drilling and making sure that it all lined up and that it wasn't going to fall down. You know, that was quite something. But I like a challenge, and I love working at Blue Hill. They're
Excellent.
terrific, and they're very open to ideas. They're very grateful when we have different ideas. We're starting to do openings on a Saturday in May as opposed to the Thursday nights that we used to do. I find it's much better to use the grounds and walk through and, you know, have a picnic, and, you know, we're putting flags so people can know where to enter now. We're like, I'm figuring it out still after all these years, how to best get people to know how to enter that space. I
Right.
usually have the cell phone. Where are we? Where do we park? Where do we enter? Where are you?
Yep. Cool. Excellent. Thank you. That gives a lot of perspective on a very, very big and sprawling kind of space that you
It
have.
is.
Thanks. All right. Now we're finally going to get over back to Dick, and we're going to talk about your 2 spots. You've got the Pelham Arts Center. You've got Garnerville Arts. I love Garnerville Arts because of the whole industrial past of that area, and to repurpose those factories the way the folks up there have, to me, is very exciting. As a historian, as an art lover, what are the challenges of being in a place like that, and what are the advantages of being in a place like that?
Well, I would say, and thank you for the question, I would say that as a curator, so I am ever the guest curator. It's always a place that it's always often it's new places. It's never often the same space. What I do know in regards to just size, it's really bizarre to see you put a lot of work into an exhibition and the space is so huge that after you just kind of like lay it out in your mind, and you might, you know, I have a friend that sometimes like CADs up the layout, and you look and you go, that is not at all sort of, it looks so tiny in a big space. So Garner, the big challenge with Garner was, for one, having Garner not eat your exhibition. Because the space could eat your whole exhibition. And you lay it out, and you know, you had, you know, what you wanted as far as layout goes and how you wanted, you know, placement and, you know, thematically how it just relates to each other. But Garner is such a huge room. It's almost, the real challenge in Garner is that, well, there's 2 challenges. One, the size of it. It's really huge. And it's unforgiving in its size. It doesn't care about your issues. It does not care about any of your problems. It knows that it is to be filled, right? So that was one problem with Garner. The other problem with Garner is that when you're dealing with a very old structure, you know, it's really difficult to get work. This could sound, you know, not as if it's at the top of the list of a challenge, but it's hard to get work even when you have to go into this old brick. Each piece was just a little askew.
And that would make me crazy.
Right.
I'm one of those people where it has to be exact and perfect.
God, yes, but you know, again, the room is unforgiving. It doesn't care. It's, you know, from the 18th century. Those bricks have been around for a long time. It's not going to change its dynamics for you, right? So you got to try to work around the dynamics. And I think that also one of the issues with Garner was a bit based on like its remoteness, right? So if you didn't have, the Cover Level remix I did at Garner that opened in the spring, it opened with the Garner Arts Festival. which, you know, as a festival, that's a driver, it drives people. But after that opening, bringing people out to see the exhibit had a bit of a challenge in that sense. Only because I think, you know, it needed to be like, I always felt like everyone I spoke to there when they would come to the show, going there was a part of their day. Like they went to have dinner, like they went to do other things. So it's almost like programming a show there, you have to program your show into people programming their day, which sounds like I'm trying to be Neil Young and a poet, but it really, you have to have people program, how you program the show, you gotta have people program your show into how they program their day. So they'll go to your show, you know, they will go have some dinner, they might do an outdoor thing that they've always, you know, have been thinking about doing. So I know that Garner has its own challenges, but within the whole bigger picture of it all, Garner is such a beautiful place.
Yeah.
It's own, and it's also, I think Garner has so the room at Garner, that is the room, the space when you first come in, which is a great space. That's the space that I think more, I don't think people, the other room where the biggest space where I was at, I don't think people are necessarily thinking of buying. That's a room to just go see stuff, right? And the other room that is very much closer to the entrance of Garner when you come into the center, that room always felt to me like that was a room that was more built for sales. So it's also that challenge at Garner. At Pelham, I would say, and remember, again, I have this traveling exhibition. So later in the year, it's going to be one in Baltimore. Later in the year, I'm speaking to a Tennessee organization.
Okay.
So it's always it's a touring exhibition, you know, as in the vein of a music group that's on tour, right? But the challenges, I think, at Pelham was that it reversed itself, right? Now I had all this work because I was very much concerned about filling
Garner. Yeah.
Garner.
Okay.
Right. And now we get to
Aisles
Pelham.
and aisles and aisles.
Right. And I also wanted, you know, sort of a decent amount of space, like a gutter between the works, so that it doesn't seem like too cluttered. So the challenge I think with Pelham was that one, it was more about being more creative and being more intentional on placement to create like energy and themes based on how you actually are having the work. While as opposed to Garner, which was like, can we make the room feel full, right? So Garner, that was a thing that it was such vast sizes. I also, challenge-wise, I really loved, I'm sorry, my phone is ringing. I should put it on mute, I'm sorry. Also, I know, right? Also, one of the things I really liked about Pelham, in a sense of how sort of active they are in the community. They're very active, community-driven art center that, you know, engages the population with multiple sort of classes and exhibitions and talks, and, you know, a lot of things that are teen-oriented, are child and kid-oriented, that, you know, gives, you know, the community like this kind of like 360-degree sort of engagement, which I really found that was really amazing. And it was different a bit from Garner, because Garner still has, you know, I mean, any art center, their value, art center's value is how valuable they are to the community.
Right.
So, you know, Garner had some of those same things, but I think that because of where Pelham is situated as opposed to where Garner is situated as far as their geography goes and where they're at. And, you know, Pelham is right there off the train stop of the metro. So it had like all of these really awesome. So when I curate a show outside of the city, in New York, I always love it to have this level of accessibility that Pelham had that Garner didn't have. But then Garner also had like the whole, oh my God, this is amazing. Like all the outdoor things, like the walks by the water, like it just had all
Was
these
there
cool things.
any dichotomy also between Pelham is a very wealthy upscale area, a little bit more homogenous than say Garnerville, which is much more diverse and also much more of a working area. The history of the Garnerville mills, African Americans worked there, Irish immigrants worked there, Polish, Italian immigrants worked there. Some of the people that were least well regarded by the rest of society wound up working in that facility. I would imagine that some of your shows, particularly the album show, would really speak to that community, perhaps some in a way different than it would speak to the wealthier, more homogenous community over in Pelham. I could be wrong, but
well, you know, it's interesting that you bring that up because, you know, in researching researching the history of Garner and, you know, how it changed and how the zoning changed and how like they kind of like repurposed it, you know, on that whole land and, you know, it actually being physically in two towns because it's in two towns.
Right. Haverstraw and
in Garnersville. Right. So I did feel the historical energy of hard work while at Garner. I felt it. I was like, this, you know, someone was here on a break. They were tired, you know, and of course it was like a mill town as well. So,
yes,
you know, people lived there in those areas, you know, so I felt a lot of energy that was really, it spoke because I think that energy spoke to the music that people were making and the work they put into their album covers to convey the energy that was on the record. So I almost, because, you know, a lot of music, you know, it's always great to make a really song about something happy, like Pharrell, happy, but having a song about this hard work and this turmoil and the challenges of life, those songs, like the visceral connection to people of those songs, I kind of felt at Garner. That was amazing. And then and like you said, to contrast that against how the homogeneousness of Pelham, and although I would say that although the demographic of where Pelham is at, I mean, where Garner's Art Center is at and where Pelham is at, totally different, right? It's definitely, you know, and I purposely did a drive around a lot in that area at Garner, right? Just to like even more feel the actual energy of the town where the center is at. And it was definitely, the drive around there was so completely different than the drive around in for Pelham. But I do know that the equalizer of all those things is when you come in and you see the work. So the work is such a touring, you know, it's a show that you can appreciate whether or not you have you know, daily financial challenges or whether you don't have daily financial challenges. So I think that the difference in the two was pretty stark in the sense of, you know, just the you know, the way the towns looked and the income of the population. But it was definitely still everyone had this like high level of appreciation because a common denominator of many people is album covers. It almost is like
very much so.
You high on a hog or you know low on a pole, you still very well could love the same album cover.
Everybody loves the cover of The Wiz. Do you remember that?
God.
Thrown Back?
Yes.
Everybody knows that.
Yes.
from a certain age group. And so that can connect people that might think of themselves as being very different from each other.
Yes, yes. Like maybe you don't feel like you have any, and that was also amazing because I also love how I take Cover Lover to put a room of artists together who might not it like disparate in the types of people of where they come from and the works that they normally do, but it brings people together in a way that so in the show I would have like these super like have like a super fine artist next to a guy like example. So the background of this wall here,
Mhm.
the artist is named Misha, and he was in the show. He was in Cover Lover Remix. He also was one of the artists that did the live mural painting at Pelham. I don't know if you knew about that live mural painting. They're still outside on the panels on the side of the Pelham Art
Oh,
Center.
that's what those are. Okay.
Yes, they were done live during the opening of Cover Lover Remix at Pelham. So he's actually more of a muralist, right? I had someone that normally does sculpt work make a painting, he actually did 2 covers. He did a Vangelis cover, which of course is like very Chariots of Fire.
Right. Yeah.
And he did 2 covers. So it really put into the room as artists go, this, sort of mixy level of artists, but all of them having, a really great take on what the thematically what it is, and then just having a really good representation of how they can convey their work
Cool.
through this kind of pop culture thing.
Excellent. I think we actually have a question before I wrap it up and go back to each of you for a very quick summation from each of you. I think we've got a question. Lisa, is this true?
We do, but the question was answered already by the curator speaking. I just wanted to interject for 1 minute and remind everybody who's listening that, because I know there's a lot of artists in the audience like me. If you want to know what these curators are working on in the future and what opportunities they have, I strongly recommend that you follow them on social media and go to their website. And if you want to see the list of everyone's names and so on, including John, our wonderful host, just go to rocklandartsfestival.org and click on the events calendar, and you will see their information there, because I know that the audience is incredibly interested in the present and the future of art with these curators.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yes.
And now to kind of sum up for everybody, I'm going to toss this question out and go to each of you to possibly give an answer. The world is not necessarily the happiest place at the moment. Underlying racism, anti-Semitism, homophobia, all sorts of ugly, ugly things that many of the people who felt such things always kept inside before are now just being thrown out there into all of our faces. Funding is being cut. We're coming out of the loneliest time period for a good number of people in the world with the shutdowns that we had for COVID and everything. It's a very different place than it was, say, 5 years ago or 10 years ago, or let's say, I'll say it, prior to 2016. What do you see as our future? Where is art's place in going now? Where's your place as a curator going forward? Will you address these issues, or will you choose to try and lighten our load? Which is the way that you're going to go? Let's start. And since we've been going in the same order all the time, Ray, any ideas about that quickly?
Well, being a commercial gallery, it's a little bit
Different.
It's a little bit difficult to put some of these issues on the wall.
Mm-hmm. I understand that. So yes, so you're going to try and find a way to lighten our load through art.
Yes. Pretty
Okay.
much. Yes.
That makes a lot of sense. I
want to stay with the aesthetics.
Right. I wish you all the best of luck in the future. I will come down and take a look around. And thank you for your thoughts. Moving on, Shari.
Thank you, John.
I definitely do not think to shy away from anything that's subversive. I think the most important thing for me in art is for the viewer to have an experience, whether they stop and have an emotional connection to the piece, or it brings them something to think about, which might not be pleasant, which might be the state of the world. But I do think that it's important that every viewer sees themselves in work, which means opening it up to a diverse group of artists.
That's beautifully said. And isn't it kind of tragic that we live in a world where respect, courtesy, kindness are subversive? Thank you. Keep up your good work, Shari. Thank you for being with us tonight. Barbara, in the big corporate world, can you say these things on the walls, or do we?
Well, I'm
Good
I'm very
question.
sensitive, and I think that, art there's a lot of freedom within art, and people can express things that people sometimes don't understand, and they're really getting it out. And I'm open to what the piece says. And I think if it's extremely literal and it's showing something that is graphic, such as tortured people or things like that, I would be reticent to show it because it's hanging for 6 months. It's not a show that's up for a short period of time. And when it's up for so long, it can be extremely disturbing. So I'm very aware of what's disturbing and what's not. And some things which are dark subjects, I will say, ones that really encourage a person to question and to really wonder. There's a place for those pieces, but you also realize we have childcare.
Yes.
So I'm always putting something that's more imaginative near the childcare. You have parents coming, dropping off little children. And so I'm extremely sensitive to both that's what I love about being a curator. I'm sensitive to the viewer as well as the artist. And I am really surprised when I read about some artworks that I didn't quite see, and artworks need to be read. You need to take a look at them, not quickly, but they need to be read. And so when you're looking at a painting or a drawing or any work of art in any medium for a long period of time, sometimes it's revealing something that might look gentle and it's not. So I just have an open mind.
Okay.
And I encourage people to submit what they'd like, and we go from there.
My fear when I had prepared this question earlier in the last couple of days, my fear in terms of your showings was going to be that because they were there for like 6 months, that even something that had an important message or even a disturbing message would become dead to them because they walked by it every single day, and that it would somehow lose whatever power it might have had. Sort of, the way kids become totally, violence doesn't bother them because of the video games that they play, and the brutality that's in video games. It's deadened their nerves to that. And I would hate to think that art might have the same problem were it to be displayed for as long as I know your shows run.
Right. That is a concern, but also pieces, as I say, if you move away from the literal and it's an enigma, that's what engages people because they see it another time and it's very different because it's up for interpretation. They are the last piece of that artwork. It's their interpretation of the artwork.
Completion is the viewer or the consumer of the
so
artwork.
that to me
use
is
that word.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you. And thank you for being with us tonight. It has been a true pleasure. And finally, Dick, what have you got to say about this?
You know what? Can you direct the question to me again?
Sure. Just the fact that with all of the negativity that's going out in the world today, all of the folks that just seem to want to push out all of the hatred that there's possible, how do you as an artist and a curator respond to that? Do you try and go the route of just making people feel better? And that's not an ignoble cause. I'm not saying that it is, but also, or do you make them think more?
Well,
where do you find yourself falling? I think I might be able to guess, but go ahead.
Well, I wouldn't say that I am like firmly only in one camp of the side of that question. So
Which
I
is
do think
wise.
that being challenged, is goal one of art, right? Being challenged is definitely goal one of artwork. I think that has been a theme throughout the history of people making art, right? And I know that for a fact that, with, like you said, all of the, horrors, the people on people horrors, that's a real thing. And people need to actually have that be, sometimes you have to put it in people's face. But then
Strange
at the
fruit. You remember the
yes,
song?
of course,
That
yes.
woke a lot of, well, the few white people that heard it,
Right,
woke a number
right.
of them up.
Right, yes. And they have to have that as a, I think that's kind of like a mandate for how I would, my curatorial mandate, if you will. But I also know that the pure value of making someone feel good through art has its benefit as well. It has high value. When you see things, you love it, you appreciate it, it brings some level of joy to you. That has its value
Balance.
as well, right? So I wouldn't say that I would be strictly in either camp. I definitely would be very much about, raising consciousness and making sure people understand what's happening in the world outside of their shoes, because we get comfortable in our own shoes a lot, and we sometimes forget that everyone's got their own shoes. And but I will also, I know that, and it's like, so as a quick aside, I curated this show called Discreet in the Street, which was a two-man show of two artists that were street photographers. So many great photos of, like, Hasidic communities, people just being natural and just discreet in the street, because to get a good photo like that, you got to be a little discreet, right? When someone's aware, they'll start posing, they'll act different, right? And that show, which I'm going to do again, that show gave you, it was such a slice of life in so many different communities, and gave you an imagery that, you could recognize things in these communities that you were not a part of, but you could recognize things like, a mother and a father both holding their kid's hand and pulling their child back from ongoing traffic, like all these things that I think, it's for me, it's balance. It's all about balance for me. That's what it is.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so
Yes.
much for being with us. And I look forward to seeing more of what you're
Yes.
curating in the future. I'm going to
Yes.
toss it back to Lisa. Lisa, it has been a pleasure for me to be here again. These folks are fascinating. I kind of wish this could go on a little longer, since everybody does seem to have a lot to say, but 4 wonderful curators. And I'm going to toss this back to Lisa D'Amico and say thank you all and have a good evening.
Thank you
you.
so much.
Thank you.
This was wonderful. And for everyone listening, the Arts Festival runs until February 10th. And we have 10 more virtual events, everything from live art demonstrations, indie filmmakers, and John will be hosting the Writers Roundtable. So please go to the events calendar on the website, rocklandartsfestival.org, and join us again. And please follow everyone here on the panel. We thank you so much, and good night, everyone.
Yes,
Good
good
night,
night.
everybody.
Thank you. Bye,
Yes.
everyone.
Bye.